that presumably you can have some common ground with an atheist, for example, he claims to believe in the intellect, the use of the intellect, so we use rational proofs with such people. So you'll find that the Wahhabis, they will hate the two schools of Islamic, the Sunni theology, the Ash'ari school and the Maturidi school. Also, the Wahhabis have a categorical rejection of Tasawwuf, Sufism, the science of Islamic spirituality. They will have diatribes going on and on about bid'ah, 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 innovation. So these are signs, if you want to know, is this guy a Wahhabi or at least influenced by Wahhabism, then this is a good checklist. And we mentioned some of their clerics that they regard as being some of the greatest scholars who ever walked the face of the earth. So, which is not the case. Okay, so now let's look to solutions. How do we fix this mess? How do we begin to fix this mess, inshallah? Well, the first thing is that for the West to not allow their agencies, meaning like their intelligence agencies and the likes, to be driven by the military-industrial complex. One of the problems is, of course, you find the hypocrisy in American foreign policy. It is what it is, not trying to go into any type of conspiracies. But the fact is that you will find that often the West is giving support to these extremist groups when it fits their agenda. Here you have, I think you guys might know this woman. This lady here, she is talking about how Al-Qaeda came into being. And she admits it was because of what the U.S. foreign policy was during the time dealing with the Russians, because the United States had what? An agenda against the Soviet Union. So then they propped up the group that they called Mujahideen, and later in Afghanistan, and then later some of that will morph into Al-Qaeda. So this is what Hillary Clinton says.
To have a history of kind of moving in and out of Pakistan. I mean, let's remember here, the people we are fighting today, we funded 20 years ago. And we did it because we were locked in this struggle with the Soviet Union. They invaded Afghanistan, and we did not want to see them control Central Asia, and we went to work. And it was President Reagan in partnership with the Congress, led by Democrats, who said, you know what, sounds like a pretty good idea. Let's deal with the ISI and the Pakistani military, and let's go recruit these mujahideen, and let's get some to come from Saudi Arabia and other places, importing their Wahhabi brand of Islam, so that we can go beat the Soviet Union.
There you go. You have it right there. Also with this, if you remember Rambo 3, what was it about? Rambo, he goes and he's fighting on the side of what they call the Mujahideen. Yeah. And then now those people, the Taliban and also these characters are coming out of Saudi Arabia. Now they are what? Enemy number one. 30, 25 years ago, they were what? Heroes of the United States. Yeah. So one of the major problems is this foreign policy. The same with Gaddafi. You had the U.S. supporting these, as they call them, foreign fighters, meaning Wahhabis, these so-called ISIS, these extremist Wahhabi factions going into Libya to fight against Gaddafi. And now Libya is in a mess right now, in a state of chaos. So you have the problem with the foreign policy, and I don't want to go too much into it, but I mean, it is what it is. That you can't say that we condemn extremism, we condemn this radicalization, and then on the other hand, you're supporting it. Another problem with it, related to this, the foreign policy, is also the issue with Saudi Arabia. You have Saudi Arabia getting $100 million military deals, shipping them all kinds of weapons. The people that bombed, according to the mainstream narrative, that blew up the World Trade Center, they were all from Saudi Arabia. They weren't from Afghanistan. They weren't from Iraq. They were from Saudi Arabia. And at the same time, Saudi Arabia is getting hundreds of millions of dollars of weapons. Also, you have the problem, of course, with Israel, where Israel, it gets more foreign aid, a country of about 7 million people. It gets more foreign aid than all of sub-Saharan Africa, which is about 700 million people. So it's 100 times the population, and it gets less foreign aid than Israel does. So this issue with the foreign policy, it's a problem. And it has to be addressed. There has to be some kind of balance with American foreign policy. And a lot of it is driven by greed. The other thing I was saying about, you have these agencies where you have Muslims who are being entrapped. Basically, it's entrapment. You find that they're getting people to go to mosque and then encourage them to join extremist groups. These guys are not thinking about this. This is not on their agenda. And then they encourage these guys, usually people already alienated in the communities, they encourage them to join these extremist groups. It doesn't even exist. And then the guy, he's ready, or they want him to go and do a terrorist mission, and then he goes, he's getting ready to go blow up something, and then the cops come and they arrest him. How are you going to engender the trust of the people? You cannot deal with terrorism unless the Muslims, real Muslims, are helping. This is a problem when you hear some of the people on the right wing say, why don't the Muslims condemn these extremists? Well, we do condemn them. But also, even in general, who have been the biggest victims of these extremist groups? It's been other Muslims. So Muslims have, now there's another point here there about not enough Muslims are condemning these groups. And a lot of Muslims, they don't know the issues. When we talked about the creed, the theology, that a lot of the Muslims, they don't know the difference between these different sects. They don't know the history behind these different groups. And they see people that they regard as Muslims being attacked, and then a lot of people have the attitude, let's circle the wagons. I have to protect those people who are ostensibly Muslim. But if you have this radical ideology in your mosque, then you have to deal with the radical ideology. When you go into mosque, you can go to mosque in this city, and you will find, when you go usually look at the bookshelves, you will find for sure books coming out of Saudi Arabia promoting the Wahhabi ideology. Without a doubt, you will find that in this city. And then those same people will tell you, we condemn extremism and radicalization. Now many of them, when they say it, they mean it. But they don't know what the issues are. Like you say to a lot of them about Wahhabism, they don't know the issues. This is not an excuse, I'm not excusing them. But they themselves are confused. And then you have others who know what the issues are. And they are silent about the Wahhabis. Because very often they are on the payroll from the Saudi government. Or they themselves are promoters of the Saudi doctrine and methodology. So this is a reality. So these are things from, say, in the general population, these are issues that need to be addressed. The military, the greed of the military-industrial complex, the certain agencies, intelligence agencies, framing people and inventing plots that don't even, these guys have no interest in doing this stuff, and they trick them and they push them to get caught in these plots. And they do that in order to keep funding for these agencies, meaning for that particular department. And also the issues with Israel, and most people who look at it objectively, I think most people say it's kind of sort of out of balance. What else can be done? Now, in the Muslim community, there are things that we need to do, and basically it's on our shoulders to address. Among those issues, inshallah, I have it here, inshallah, I'll summarize. That we have to look at those young people in particular who may feel alienated in their communities. You'll find often the guys who, what happens? How does a guy become radicalized in brief? Typically, either you have a person who's a convert, and a lot of the converts, they come to Islam because they see that there's something wrong with the society. They feel that there's something wrong here, meaning like the materialism of the society, and they want something more substantial than going to the mall and shopping. So they're looking for some purpose in their life. And then they look at, for example, things going on around the world, and I'm saying America, they're the big boys on the block. You look at what has been done, what this country has done to other people. Not just Muslims. Oh, you talk about Southeast Asia during the Vietnam War period. You talk the bombing of Panama, the bombing of Grenada, Central America. I mean, you look around the world, there's a lot of blood. So a person like that, he's looking, he's upset with what's going on. He looks at the greed and corruption of the elite in this society. So then this guy, he's already upset. He starts to regard himself, let's say, as a Muslim. And then he starts seeing what's going on, for example, in the Middle East and parts of the Muslim world. The nature of a young guy, he's going to be upset. And then if he encounters like the talk of like this Moroccan guy saying that all of those people are not Muslim and you can go and you can slaughter them. All these people are disbelievers and worshippers of graves, as they say. This guy, it's very easy for him to get radicalized. You can follow. The same applies to the two-gen guys, the second generation youth. A lot of Muslims who grew up in this country, second generation, their parents are, if you wish, stuck in the country, the culture of the old country. They feel far out of place with American society. They often are not themselves very religious. So you have this young guy who's growing up here, and he feels out of place. People are making fun of him because if he's of color, or certainly because of his religion, because of his parents. So he feels alienated in the society. And he looks at his parents, and he sees his parents, sometimes they even change their names, they try to hide their identity. So he doesn't want to go the way of his parents. They're like sellouts. This is how he looks at his parents. And he looks at the people around him, they hate him. So then he feels like, well, what's the solution? Well, if I'm coming from a Muslim background, if you deem yourself to be a Muslim, you would believe that Islam is the solution. So then you look and you see, well, what's out there? What does Islam say about this? What does Islam say about that? What does Islam say about this? And he will, in his searching, often he will come across these people who are under this radical ideology. So then he starts reading, he says, well, look at what they do, look at the secular society, and they're corrupt, and they do this, and they do that. And he's like, yeah, that's exactly what I experienced. That's it. And then one step leads to another, which leads to another, which leads to another. And then, as we say, those Wahhabi books, they are a gateway drug to extremism. The next thing you know, he's talking about planting bombs somewhere in this country, or going over to Iraq, or over to Syria to go to war. So because we have to deal with the alienation. And how do we deal with that? How do we address this? You take it all the way back, the Sunni solution, meaning of the real traditionalists. Because as we said, the Wahhabis, although they call them in the media Sunnis or radical Sunnis or ultra-conservative Sunnis, the real Sunnis, we say these people are not Sunni Muslim because they believe in object worship. And then they're claiming that the Muslims at large are disbelievers and it's illegitimate to murder them, to kill them. That is a case where you make takfir on somebody. If somebody's saying God is something up in outer space or beyond outer space with dimensions, with a location, this is an object, it's not the creator. So the one who worships something other than the creator, in reality, really, he worships something other than the creator. Because they're worshiping this thing that they believe is distant, far above their head with the size and shape and things of this nature. So he's not a worshiper of the creator. So he's not a Muslim. Now that doesn't mean you go out and you start shooting them and killing them. No, it doesn't mean that. But he does not, just as Louis Farrakhan, who teaches that God is a human being, the one who claims that God is an object, even if he says an object unlike other objects, even if he doesn't use the word object, but he's saying something of magnitude, something of size, something of composition, meaning with parts in one place, other parts in other places. What have you believe? So he's not a Muslim. He doesn't believe as the Prophet taught, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When the Muslim goes to worship the Creator, he doesn't have images in his heart. He doesn't have images in his mind. He's not praying to something in a distance or in a direction. This guy, he's praying to something above him. It's like deformed. It has two legs, two feet, one shin, two right hands. No, he's praying to some figment of his imagination. So in reality, he's not a Muslim because he's not worshiping God. How do you expose these people? You take it back to the belief. Because it's very easy to demonstrate or explain the proper belief in the Creator, as we've mentioned multiple times here. To explain that this is the proper belief in God. God is one, without a need, without a similarity, not dependent upon any of the creations. This is the proper belief in God. The one who prays to an object, he's not a Muslim. Okay, so then you can rationally explain this. You can demonstrate this with verses from the Quran. You can demonstrate this with sayings of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You can demonstrate this from the sayings of the scholars and the consensus of the Sunni scholars that the one who believes God is an object is not a Muslim. Something with an object, I don't mean necessarily always physical, something dimensional. So one who believes God is a dimensional being is not a Muslim. So we start from the belief. We start from the belief, explaining the proper belief, and then juxtaposing it, comparing it to what the Wahhabis say. And the things that I said about them, it's in their books. And one of the brothers is shaking his head here. Believe that God has a face and eyes and fingers and literally situated in one location and moves about and then is in another location. This is their belief. This isn't like exaggerating what they claim. This is their belief. So by explaining that their belief does not comply with the teachings of the Prophet, they do not comply with Islam. Also, we can show historically, as we've done here, mashallah, this evening, this ideology began when? 250 years ago. Its seed was planted by Ibn Taymiyyah 700 years ago. But the ideology that we are dealing with of the Takfiris, of the Wahhabis / Qutubis, or the combination of thereof with the Al-Qaeda, this ideology did not get its origin, did not start until roughly 250 years ago. So these people who claim to be Salafis, claim to be following the method of the Prophet ﷺ and the Muslims of the first 3 generations, they are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years removed from the era of the Salaf, and their practices are absolutely contrary to the teachings of the Prophet and the teachings of the Salaf ﷺ. So this is how we do it, with sincerity. The Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, that the deeds, the general meaning is the deeds are by intention. Meaning that if we really want to deal with this extremism, and it's in all of our interests to address this extremism that is committed in the name of Islam, that we have to be sincere. We have to want to know the truth and to teach the truth and stand up to those who are corrupting the truth. That the verse that was mentioned at the beginning of the speech, that be among those who enjoy, who follow the good, who abide by the good and enjoin the ma'ruf, the good, and forbid the evil. Be among those people. With what? Sincerity. When you have this menace that is being spread in the name of Islam, and Islam is being slandered every day, Muslims being slandered every day because of this ideology. And as I said, many Muslims, they'll tell you we condemn the extremism, and they are sincere in that, but they don't know what the issues are. They don't have the knowledge to say, well, this is what a Wahhabi is, this is who they are, this is what they teach. They see the guy, he lines up and prays for them, he said, okay, he's Muslim. They don't know the reality of Wahhabism. So this is why it's critical that we teach fellow Muslims about this ideology, and we teach the general public. Because there are many people, of course, who are searching. They themselves are empty. They're looking for a purpose to their life. And they want to know what happens to me after I die. Okay, there are many people that they want to know the truth. If a Wahhabi gets to him, it will run the person away. The Wahhabi will tell him, yeah, well, you need to pray to something, giant thing that's above your head, and it has hands, it stretches out, and eyes, and fingers, and it has a foot that it will put inside the hellfire. This is something that for many, this will repel them. But when a Muslim explains that the Creator existed before the creation, there was no up or down, there were no directions, there was no distance, there was no light, there was no direction, there was no time, there was no place. Only the Creator deserves to be worshipped. Only the Creator deserves to be worshipped. And the Creator is not at all in any way whatsoever similar to the creations. There are many people who would hear that and say, man, I want to learn about this. And this is what we have to share with the public and not play games with people. Be straightforward. Let them know about the true belief and warn, as the Quran commands us, to enjoin the good and forbid the evil. Warn the people about these extremists. Warn the people about them. Don't play games. Don't play word games. Speak to the point who these people are, what their history is, what their practices are, and warn them about their bad belief in the Creator. Walhamdulillah, wa sallallahu ala rasulillah. That's it, Brother Daughter.
It's that.
Yeah.